Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B, and I'm back for the first time in a while with a Neil Diamond review. This is one of the first records I ever bought. The moment in my life where I went from being a guy who likes music to a guy who really identified with singer-songwriter culture and the culture of like memorizing what albums people had put out came in my first year of college when I fell in love with both Neil Diamond and Cat Stevens. And the first record I ever bought was a sort of joint pressing of Cat Stevens' Matthew and Son and New Masters. And then shortly thereafter, I went and sought out Touching You, Touching Me, and Taproot Manuscript, also by Neil Diamond. So this is a strange album in the sense that its title, it'll occur to many of you, comes from Sweet Caroline. And that's because the UK pressing of this album would have been the album to introduce Sweet Caroline, at least to those who discovered songs through albums and not through the radio or singles. However, in the United States, rather than putting Sweet Caroline on this new record, they put it on his previous record, Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show, making that a more complete record. I feel like one of the things that maybe holds Neil Diamond back from being quite as iconic as some of those at the true pantheon of rock and roll is that he's not associated with one particular album. And I feel like had maybe these two albums, Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show and Touching You, Touching Me, been instead released as one project, either a double album or, the best of the two albums together, that would likely have been Neil Diamond's masterpiece. My understanding with the Brother Loves album is that it was rushed out pretty quickly after he put out the Brother Loves Traveling Salvation Show single. And some of the songs on there certainly do sound a bit rough, even though I like quite a few of the songs on there and think that one has a case to being an all-time great album, despite how rushed it was. But if you put these two albums together and you were to take the best tracks from all of them, you definitely would have an album masterpiece. So let's talk about what's on Touching You, Touching Me. So this album opens with a song called Everybody's Talking. So this one is written by a guy named Fred Neil, though it was most famously recorded by Harry Nilsson. Now, Neil Diamond is, of course, primarily known as a singer-songwriter, but this album sees him taking a step back and producing and recording quite a few cover songs. So again, I feel like what holds this one back from being an all-time great album is it's not showing that much of Neil's songwriting, but the production on here is overall much more consistent than the production on the previous album. So on this opening track, Everyone's Talking, it has a kind of reedy feel to it. And to be honest, I'm not sure if some of that is just maybe this isn't a great quality vinyl or I don't have a great quality record player. I'm not into the technical side of music listening. But regardless, I think some of that was on purpose. There was a kind of homespun, strumming the banjo kind of country feel to it. Otherwise, largely true to Harry Nilsson's version, though some of the vocal ad-libbing at the end is distinctly Neil Diamond. This song is singer-songwriter at its purest. It's only like one verse and a chorus, basically, but talking broadly about the idea of living free, seeking out a better world, and the way the instruments are mixed in here a way, and that's both clean, but just slightly sloppy, giving it a DIY feel, makes it a great recording. Track number 2 is called Mr. Bojangles. This one is by a reasonably well-known songwriter named Jerry Jeff Walker, but it was, of course, made a huge hit by the Rat Pack singer Sammy Davis Jr. So this one fits in with Diamond's broader catalog in that it's about a performer who's simultaneously happy and kind of lonely. Diamond is someone who struggled with stage fright for a long time before suddenly blossoming as this larger-than-life glittering performer. It's also a song about a performer having a relationship with his dog for a long part of his career, and that kind of makes it feel similar to Neil Diamond's earlier song Shiloh, a song about an imaginary friend. In other ways, this one is a bit more different than Neil Diamond's original songs because Neil Diamond often focuses on emotions, and this one has lyrics to it. So it's kind of like if Neil Diamond were to cover a Bob Dylan song. Track number 3 is a Neil Diamond original, and it's called Smoky Lady. This is a slightly weird song in that it mixes flutes and dramatic horns and its drum sound to create a kind of larger than life, kitschy Vegas feel. But at its core, it's just a simple rock and roll kind of James Brown-esque groove. So it's kind of not quite one thing, not quite another. So it's a weird sound. I don't think it's a bad sound. It's just you hear it at first, it's weird, but it doesn't mean you don't like it. The masterpiece of this album closes out side A, and it's a song called Holly Holy. If Brothers Love's Traveling Salvation Show was Neil being a little silly but sincere in his affection for gospel music, Holly Holy is him taking things to the next level by writing a spiritual song that is not tied to any pre existing religion. It's just channeling that gospel feeling of hope, this sense of longing for miracles with this absolutely soaring bridge slash chorus. It's a song that starts very slowly. And honestly, the first time I heard it, I wasn't sure if I liked it because it required patience. But once you get used to it and you realize how epic that rise is, you can see why it's one of the Neil Diamond classics. Track number 5 is another cover. This is Both Sides Now, and it's just a really cool arrangement. This is actually the first version I ever heard of the song Both Sides Now. I mean, when I heard this years ago. But this is a Joni Mitchell song. It's a great poetic page of lyrics about how going through life means you see almost everything through contradictory, optimistic, and negative perspectives. And the problem with the Joni Mitchell song is it's such a downer. I find it kind of hard to enjoy the way it's recorded. That said, Judy Collins made Both Sides Now a hit with an up-tempo, organ-based review, and Neil's version largely owes itself to the Judy Collins version, but some of the specifics of the sound I really like in this one. It opens with a very simple bass juxtaposed against a somewhat more complex and bright sounding organ. There's some really dramatic, some would say over intense rises in volume with the chorus that give it an interesting realness. From the subtle way Neil sings bows and rows of angel hair to the aching longing on his performance on the chorus. Track number 6 is another Neil original. It's called And the Singer Sings His Song. It has a vaguely medieval feel that makes me almost think of the Pied Piper of Hamelin when I listen to it, except it doesn't have the dark side of the Pied Piper of Hamelin story. So I don't know, it's just Neil kind of peacefully imagining he's singing from a music box. Track number 7, another Neil original. It's called Ain't No Way. This is a very simple groove, but it's very nicely produced. And if you look at the lyrics, the first verse is almost nothing in its simplicity. It's just banal happiness. And then verse 2 is kind of eccentric in how it expresses the opposite. So it's just simple happy, simple sad, great produced groove. Track number 8 is called New York Boy. This is one of my favorite Neil Diamond songs, or at least amongst the ones that isn't really considered a hit. And it's basically a simple concept. It's him saying he would feel kind of out of place if he walked in the South, but he hopes that that initial feeling of out of place does not mean he gets rejected by Southern culture. And track number 9 is a cover of Buffy Sainte-Marie's Until It's Time for You to Go. This is the most cinematic of the recordings here in terms of how the strings sound. You have some nice little castanet clicks in the background. And at one point, Neil even mouths one of the lyrics, "You are not a dream." This is probably the coolest choice of songs to cover on this album because Buffy Sainte-Marie is a protest singer. And, Neil Diamond is someone who rarely engaged with politics and mostly just sang about his heart in a way that he would have said was raw emotions. It wasn't about being intellectual. But that doesn't mean he didn't admire the kind of singers who did that kind of work and cover their songs when there was some kind of overlap. So later in his career, he would cover Baby Can I Hold You by Tracy Chapman. And now he's doing this love song by Buffy Sainte-Marie. But unlike Baby Can I Hold You, this isn't just a conventional love song. One could even hear this as like a polyamory anthem because it's a song saying, just because we're breaking up doesn't mean we're sad. All love is ephemeral, but it can be beautiful when it's happening, and we can continue to be grateful for that love even when it's over. So, I mean, it's not an overtly rebellious song, but there's some undertones in there making it, an interesting choice on Neil Diamond's part. So basically, there are two things going on with Touching You, Touching Me. One is that it's a continuation of the concept album that was Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show, exploring the South, being into gospel music. You hear that on songs like Holly Holy, New York Boy. Ain't No Way kind of feels like a better version of Dig In. But this is also Neil Diamond making clear that he is a real fan of great singer-songwriter music, and he is sort of expressing the tradition he wants to be seen as a part of. He's saying, "Hey, Fred, Jerry, Jeff, Joni, Buffy, I love your music. I hope you like my interpretations of it, and I hope people listen to me as an artist who really has something to say and not just someone who writes pop hits like he did in his younger days." Overall, quite the enjoyable record. And again, had it been mixed with Brother Love's Traveling Salvation Show, I guess it would have been one sole masterpiece that would have really secured Neil Diamond's fame in music history. But regardless, we get two pretty darn good albums, and I'm grateful to have them both. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.